Warner Brothers are in hot water, let's say.
Again?
Hot water that they're looking down and acknowledging that they are in themselves and have poured onto themselves. And this is written up by PC Gamer, coming from a recent earnings call where Warner Brothers have pointed out a drastic new plan for their overall gaming business. Firstly, however, following Suicide Squad losing $200 million, Multiversus has now become a $300 million write-down as well, according to WB's CEO David Zaslav and Chief Financial Officer Gunnar Wiedefels, I believe. This comes after 2 years of the game being available, though. Back in 2022 was when Multiversus first launched. Then it was taken offline. It was relaunched earlier this year with controversial monetization and the inability for rewards earned in 2022 to carry over, largely eliminating almost overnight the goodwill that was around Multiversus and 2 years worth of build-up. Overall, though, David Zaslav says WB's gaming business is substantially underperforming its potential, with year-on-year revenues down 31%. And going forward, Zaslav wants to get away from trying to launch 10, 12, 15, 20 different games and instead focus on just 4 pillar franchises with quote-unquote proven studios behind them. So the entirety of Warner Brothers gaming division will now hang on 4 specific properties, those being DC, as Zaslav says, in particular Batman, Harry Potter / Hogwarts Legacy, Mortal Kombat, and Game of Thrones. Zaslav says, I think we have a real chance now with focus to have the gaming business be steadier.
Oh, much to think about here, much to dig into. A lot of that where I'm just thinking, what are you talking about,
over there?
David? So let me get this straight.
Yes.
Suicide Squad lost $200 million.
It did a bit.
Multiversus lost $100 million. I guess, so much to pick apart. The main thing that I want from this write-up is for David Zaslav to tell me, what are these 20 games, David? What are they?
What is he referring to? He's like, I want to get away from doing all this crazy stuff, all this scattershot stuff that we're doing. Then you look at what they have put out across the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And other than Back for Blood in 2021, everything already is inside these 4 IPs, and it's not like they're doing that well with them. I liked Gotham Knights, but it's not like that thing blew up or anything.
No, Gotham Knights was all right.
It played well enough.
Suicide Squad made me appreciate that game even more, Scott Telfer, 100%.
That made me appreciate us being alive.
My question is, though, like, yeah, okay, you're focusing on Harry Potter, Batman, Game of Thrones, Mortal Kombat. You had... I know it's Suicide Squad, it's DC, but it is a Batman game. It's got Batman characters in it, and that lost you $200 million. You know what I mean? Like, yes, I know the Harry Potter game, Hogwarts Legacy, that sold 20 million copies, made a whole bunch of money. You released the Quidditch game this year and haven't talked about it since. What happened? What happened with that? Is that not a Harry Potter game? Is that not part of these 4 IPs? I think it's fair to say that these are your most successful ones overall. But to say that and to say you're focusing on them, ignoring the installments that you've had inside those franchises across the last few years, some of which were successful, but a lot of which were not. Like, how can you think that the issue has been the likes of Multiverses or these, extraneous titles that apparently exist, but I don't know about them?
Well, the thing is, like, to me, clearly the issue is live service components. Clearly it's the idea of stringing things out. The idea of a live service is what killed Gotham Knights, and that wasn't even a live service game. It was just the idea of it being one. And you could still see the remnants of that when you played it, the various different augments or whatever they called them that you would unlock to plug into armor to craft new components, the idea that they could have monetized that stuff. It felt like dead code. It's just sort of left in there if you play the game. Gotham Knights is, I would still say, recommendable in terms of a story, the combat, the sense of immersion, whatever. But overall, the general exhaustion around WB properties feels like it comes from trying to overextend what they already have. And Mortal Kombat's going to die because of this.
Listen, right, let's talk about Mortal Kombat, because, Mortal Kombat is probably the most consistently successful out of those franchises right now.
Yes.
But Warner Brothers, you are also driving that franchise into the ground. The games themselves have been good, but they have garnered a lot of negativity and a lot of backlash because of the way you are monetizing it.
Yep.
You need to, you can't just expect, because it's Mortal Kombat, for it to sell. Like, if you start getting your tendrils in it, and if you start pushing people too much away with these practices, it's going to become as disappointing as the other franchises that you've tried that with. And I just think it's a shame for NetherRealm, even though they've always been primarily the Mortal Kombat studio, for them to just be Mortal Kombat. Like, it's a shame that the industry right now, or at least WB's view of the industry right now, is so narrow and so specific and limited that them doing Injustice now feels outrageous and feels unthinkable, when if they can't continue a successful fighting franchise based around DC superheroes, which Zaslav admits is part of their core IPs. Like how limited? Yeah, just Batman. How limiting have things got where that's like off the table and that's too risky?
I'm going to flip it for a second and talk about a potential future that's a lot more positive. We're going to have to go through a lot of bad crap to get there.
Okay.
But I hope that this is a sign that the business people are leaving the industry, because there's a whiff of it here where he says everything is substantially underperforming and revenues are down. He talks about trying to hit potential. We're not getting there yet. The idea being we've not rinsed this enough yet. We've not bled this dry yet, which is what you get from a lot of business-minded people coming into a creative industry. How much money can we get out of this? How much can we take advantage of a fan base and get as much money out of them as possible? And him saying that it's underperformed so much, and we have the numbers being 31%. Those minds don't stick around if the money isn't there. And the worst period that we're in the industry is because too many of those minds are at the top. Jason Schreier, obviously writing for Bloomberg, but he's just put his his book out on Blizzard, and talking about how Bobby Kotick brought in product people from Procter & Gamble to compare the creation of video games to the creation of bars of soap. Like, this is the absolute worst of that mentality.
Yeah.
Where it's just product. It's just, you're just shipping something. You're just pushing it over the line, conveyor belt style. It's everything that people hate about the modern gaming industry. And so do we get to a point where these people stop trying to do this? Do they realize how much they can push these franchises? We're not there yet, but we're getting there. Mortal Kombat, like you said, MK1 plays phenomenally, but everything else about it is incredibly either forgettable or predatory in regards to its monetization for the fan base specifically. They put out the Mortal Kombat mobile game again, Mortal Kombat Onslaught, I think it's called. Just thoroughly off-putting things that are designed to get money out of a fan base, and that's it. And so I just wonder about where this leads. Yeah. And it's like, how much will a fan base allow themselves to be taken advantage of? Does that break before the business people go like, oh, we can't actually get any more out of this and we're moving on?
I do think definitely over a long enough timeline, these games will continue to fail in the ways that they're already failing, because like you said, the people at least who are greenlighting them, of course not the people who are actually in the trenches making the games, but the people who are dictating the entire WB Games' studio approach, is just seeing them more as product than ever before. I think limiting the entire output to these 4 mega franchises, as the companies like to call them, and just repeating what has worked in the past, like WB making the Harry Potter TV show and then saying, well, the games are going to tie into that. Having the DC James Gunn superhero movies and then saying, well, the games are going to tie into that.
I thought that's still happening.
Absolutely, man. In just having more Mortal Kombat, again, that's coming as a huge Mortal Kombat fan. More Mortal Kombat, more Game of Thrones. I just think
Game of Thrones.
No, we'll get into that in a second, probably. I just think that approach in the short term, in the long term, I think it will burn itself out. But in the short term, if that's what they're prioritizing, and they're not prioritizing, creativity within the studios, original ideas, even within those franchises, like Arkham Asylum was, Arkham Asylum starting as a tie-in to The Dark Knight and then becoming its own thing and proving itself as a Batman franchise that can stand on its own. I don't know if we get that now, because like I said, even Hogwarts Legacy, like they confirmed, I think maybe it was an Insider Gaming thing. Either way, the report was that it was going to tie into this TV show. So that doesn't even get to be its own thing anymore. That we need more synergy across our different brands. And who knows, we might get a House of the Dragon game or something. I don't know.
That's the thing for Game of Thrones. It's like, I was going to say, for that wider idea of the whole transmedia approach that you have, because they talked about it. Zaslav talked about the idea of casting one Batman voice, one actor who would be Batman in everything. Do people even want that? Like, I feel like that general idea is spun off from the MCU, that idea of a shared universe, and then going one step further and being, okay, what if it all tied in? But I don't feel like there's any consumer push towards that. And I don't feel like anyone who is a fan of creative media is like, oh my God, I can't wait for this crossover thing. Yeah. Like, there's an era of tie-in movie video games that largely all bombed. Like, some of us have our favorites from back in the day or whatever. But I don't feel like this. I feel like this push, it's almost like the AI push. It's like, that's coming from people at the top going like, isn't this the new thing? And it's like, no, it's not.
Well, that's what confuses me. Like, the focus on, it's not, I don't even think David Zaslav probably knows what a live service game is, right? But it's not him saying, like, this model has failed, this structure has failed. It's him saying these IPs have failed and they're not what we want. They aren't lucrative. They aren't a success. So to only focus it on these 4 pillars, for as successful as they are, without focusing on why maybe games within those franchises have failed previously. Just looking at literally the name that's on the box and saying good, bad, yes, no. That is just that's not good for anyone, Scott. I don't think, especially when we have had runs within those franchises, like you said, Gotham Knights, which is pretty good, Suicide Squad, which is pretty bad, that have all underperformed. The issue isn't the different games that you're making and the different franchises or original games that you're cultivating. The call is coming from inside the house, David. The call is within these franchises.
There's also the single-player multiplayer split, where the only game out of these that has done extremely well is Hogwarts Legacy, a dedicated single-player open-world game that has gone on to be one of the most highest-selling games of the last few years. I'm sure it's almost the highest-selling game of this year, just because of how much a tail that thing has. And they're not even remotely acknowledging that. However, when it comes to single-player stuff, there is Sony CFO Hiroki Totoki talking about going forward, they're going to double down on single-player stuff again because they've tried the live service experiment and it failed. Like, they have a success like Helldivers 2, which in itself had a big down period and then came back up again. But Concord only lasted 2 weeks. It's like, how many more signs on the wall, writings on the wall do you want to see? It's flashing neon. Get out of here. It's not worth it.
I know, and I understand. I understand. You look at a spreadsheet and you see the graph in the column of a live service title and how high it can go compared to a single-player game that is only a single-player game that doesn't have those microtransactions. But at the same time, surely that graph also shows how low it can go and it doesn't work. When you get a Concord, when you get a Multiverses, when you get a Suicide Squad, when you get these titles that take hundreds of millions of dollars to produce and then lose hundreds of millions of dollars on the back end, like, surely that level of risk is not sustainable. And maybe that's what David Zaslav is saying by getting down from these imaginary 20 games to only a handful. But I don't know. I mean, you talk about it all the time. I hope we get to that point where we are reining in like budgets, we are setting realistic expectations, and we're not betting the full farm on a live service model that everyone is kind of sick of or have, their own version that they're already going to, and then just sending them out to die. I think
that whole idea of, like you said, they look at the graph, go, how much, oh my God, that's making so much money, we should do one of them. And then starting where something else got to and going, we'll launch with the live service with the 5 premium currencies and we'll do that. It's all built on a level of cynicism and disrespect to the consumer base that I feel like gamers in particular can see right through. And so many companies over the years have found out that you don't underestimate, like, gaming as a medium, gaming as an art form. Gamers in general, like, we're spending on average 20, 30, 50 hours on this stuff every week. It's so different to a TV show or a movie or whatever it is. There's way more invested here from each individual. And like I said, that mentality, you can only think this way if you devalue the customer.
Yeah,
that's ultimately where I'm at. Like, and how many more times are we going to try this? Because you're coming at it with such a fundamental disregard for people's time and their money and everything else. So I'll be amazed if it works. These are popular franchises.
Yeah,
but it's such to me, a boneheaded way to approach it.
100%, man. And I think what you just said there brings us back around to Multiverses, a game that could have been cool, a game that could have been, enjoyable in spite of its obvious corporate artifice. I'm a sucker, I'm a millennial, I'll be here to bring all of these different disparate Warner Brothers properties together. I want to see Shaggy fight Arya Stark. You know what I mean? I just do. I want to see it. I just want to see those mashups. I can take a level of fun and enjoyment out of that. Yeah. However, when you botch a game with a cool concept like that, as hard as they did, like you said, I didn't even know the game came out. Like, I played it when it was in beta all of those years ago, and then it went away, and then all of the rewards were taken, and it was kind of this strange marketing messaging, of how it was going to release, what you were going to retain, what was the pricing model going to be. All of this confusion that just absolutely bogged down and overshadowed what could have been a promising game. Yeah. And I just feel like we've seen that so many times, especially across WB, but also just the wider industry at this point.
And like I said, the way that they approach it is like, you could have had your own Smash Brothers. Warner Brothers have an array of characters that are extremely lovable, historic. One thing I mentioned to you before we were recording, but the fact that they don't even mention Looney Tunes, the fact that that was something that was like the association. I know it's been a good long while since Looney Tunes were in their heyday, and there were different remakes of the cartoons and everything. But if you're talking about legacy brands and you're talking about trying to get into a wider audience, you have the kid audience with Harry Potter and to a degree Batman, but you certainly don't have it with Mortal Kombat and Game of Thrones. But you potentially could have it with Looney Tunes. Like, why is that so impossible to explore? And especially when you have Smash Brothers as an adjacent thing, or there was a whole run of Looney Tunes games across the 2000s that we grew up with.
Yeah,
those are fundamentally likable, lovable characters.
Dude, this is where I come back to how limiting Warner Brothers specifically has gotten with their products, because if you have a fully finished Looney Tunes movie that is ready to go and you decide, actually, I'd prefer to put that in the bin than release it and take a chance on it. How are you going to take a chance on building something similar from the ground up? You're just not going to do it, right? And that's what stresses me out, because they're so willing to throw stuff like that under the bus, because like you said, there is no, I don't think, any kind of value on what people have produced and the inherent value of that production. It's about treating the art and the customer with equal disrespect and hoping to get loyal fans out of it. Like, what?
Yeah, maybe... I don't know. I fundamentally think on a human level, people can tell this stuff is insincere. And maybe you get wins in the middle of that. Like I said, Mortal Kombat, you can tell which parts of that are genuine and which parts are insincere and cynical and designed to take more money away from you, which is why MK1's player base has fluctuated and bottomed out and came back a little bit and whatever. But you're still fundamentally relying on an era that was more genuine and more charming and better built. Like, it's not like, MK bottomed out before when they were under Midway, because they were themselves being, they were putting out too many releases in quick succession. They lost the through line of what the hell MK was even supposed to be. And at the time, Ed Boon was talking about rebooting it more like Gears of War, and there was a whole thing. It's not like this stuff hasn't happened before with a degree of cynicism or whatever it is. Well, I don't think that past era was cynical. I think they just got to a point through making those games over and over again. This just feels so corporate and cold and just reheating something and pretending it's new and whatever. We'll see how it goes, but it's just, oh my God, we're here again.